The advice and opinions expressed by Dr. Granpeesheh and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Good morning and welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen on World Autism Awareness Day.
Yes.
It doesn't often fall on the day that we have you, so this is an
That's
amazing...
lovely. I know, what a coincidence.
It's a
Hi,
privilege
everyone.
to be here with you. Want to welcome all of you right now. This show is coming out to you live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and about a dozen other sites. I am going to give you the knowledge that we pre-taped this a couple of days ago, just a couple of days ago, because Dr. Granpeesheh, when this airs, is at a conference.
And it's I couldn't do both.
Critical for you to be there, but we didn't want to let this go. We do have some questions that you guys have written in, and we've got some wonderful topics that we're going to be talking about. I do want to encourage you to be writing in. I'll be monitoring as you guys have questions, and we will be using some of the questions that you guys write in for next week's show. I want to let you know, in this amazing A month, this April Autism Awareness, Autism Acceptance, Autism Action, appreciation. I heard somebody say authenticity. You know, all these amazing, I'm just compiling the A words.
There you go.
It's April, autism, all the A words. In any case, thrilled to be here with you guys. So please feel free to write in right now on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We always like to remind you that the show is premiering right now live, and then it will be available for podcast almost immediately because we were able to pre-tape. You can download it. And it's its own podcast right now. Ask Dr. Doreen is its own award-winning podcast now. So please check that out. Sign up to get the feed for that. Know that it has its own YouTube channel, which is really wonderful. Give it some love and support. We love reviews on places like iTunes and Apple Music. That only helps for other people to be able to find this information.
Right.
And there is a library, there's a beginning library on the Ask Dr. Doreen YouTube site and on Ask Dr. Doreen, the website. You can find that we're slowly moving things over from the YouTube channel Autism Live, but there are it's 13 years now, full years of videos that you have been doing this and sharing your...
It's awesome. Yeah, so happy that we can provide that library to everyone.
Yeah. And
I have seen, I'm not sure what our viewers are doing, but we do see new people joining our live shows now and asking questions. So I'm really happy to see that it's expanding.
Yes, absolutely. And please tell other people. I mean, that's another way that you can get the word out. Everything that we do here at the Autism Network, it's a free download whenever wherever you get your podcast. You can find stuff on YouTube. That doesn't mean it's a free thing, that it happens for free. There are costs, so you'll see sponsors, you'll see advertisers, especially in the podcast. We hope you'll embrace that. If you want to get the podcast with no ads, then you can, if you'd like to, pay a small fee. It's $5 a month. You go to glow.fm/autism live. When you do that, you pay $5 a month. It's even cheaper if you do it across a year. But you get everything that the Autism Network does, Autism Live and Ask Dr. Doreen, and you get that with no advertising on it. If you're on the go, I know you're the one that said that to me. Some people run or they walk or they drive and they
don't want the ads. I mean, I experience that myself sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts where I'm like so in the middle of a discussion that's going on and then it's like ads. And I'm like, oh, is there any way I can pay a fee to not have the ads?
And so for those of you who want, that is available to you as well. Because it is World Autism Awareness Day, every year, this was started by the UN, World Autism Awareness Day. I know there's a lot of confusion about who started. It's the UN.
Yeah.
It's not owned by a charity. It's the UN saying that. And every year they put forth a new topic. Like a couple of years ago, it was the year of women and girls, right? And so here is the topic for this year. It's moving from surviving to thriving. And they're particularly looking at, on today at the UN, they will be hearing from people all over the world. The focus is autistic individuals sharing their regional perspectives, because autism and the way autism is dealt with is not the same in every place that there is. Every year there is a message, and this year it's a short one. If you'll indulge me, I'll just read really quickly.
I'd love to hear it.
Ever since the United Nations General Assembly designated the 2nd of April as World Autism Awareness Day in 2007, the United Nations has observed the day as a means to affirm and promote the full realization of all human rights and fundamental freedoms for autistic people on an equal basis with others. Progress has been made, not least thanks to the many amazing autistic advocates who have worked tirelessly to bring the lived experience of autistic people to the wider world. The General Assembly resolution from 2007, which is a fascinating read, and it's on the UN website if any of you want, emphasizes the importance of raising public awareness of autism. Today, 17 years later, we have moved beyond raising awareness to promoting acceptance and appreciation of autistic people and their contributions to society. Very interesting. I have to say, this blurb from them is vastly different than past years. I think they took some heat in past years.
Probably.
And it's very carefully constructed,
Crafted,
yes.
yeah.
But I appreciate very much
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
sentiment of it.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely. So we would love to know from you guys. This is a day that means a lot of things to a lot of people. There are people that say they're celebrating on Autism Awareness Day. There are people who say, no, I'm commemorating on or I'm taking action on this day. I'd love to know from you guys how you spend this day. What are the ways that you keep this day?
Right.
We have questions that people have asked that we haven't necessarily always gotten to in the past, because sometimes we're in the middle of helping a lot of things. But somebody had specifically written in and asked for both of us, when is the first time that you heard the word autism?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first time that I heard the word autism would have been in 1978, I want to say. And I had just joined a program at UCLA where you would learn the behavioral techniques as a student, and and obviously I'm remembering Corey, my first child, but you would go through a lecture course and then you would go through a practicum course. And I had already kind of worked with other organizations that were kind of not treating autism, but like for instance, for a while I had been like an assistant to an adult who had autism, and this is in another part of UCLA. But really I started to, because in those days, Shannon, there was a lot of confusion about the diagnosis itself. Like not everyone was correctly diagnosed. It was very low prevalence. We're talking in the 70s. When I first learned about autism, the prevalence that was taught to us was 1 in 15,000 children.
Amazing.
1 in 15,000. This is 78. And so when I became a part of the what was called the Young Autism Project with Ivar Lovas, closer to the end of 78, and trained to become a behavioral technician, these were the things that we were just coming off of a world where, in fact, it was still kind of prevalent. Honestly, nobody knew what causes autism. Not that we necessarily have clarity on that issue right now. We do know a lot more, but it wasn't being treated. This was pre-deinstitutionalization. This is how long ago it is. So we had institutions.
Yeah.
So we had the Camarillo State Hospital, which was close to us. And my teacher mentor at that time, Lovas, had done a lot of programs with Camarillo. There was a gentleman running, there were 3 autism units at Camarillo State Hospital, and the person running them was this Dr. Izzy Perel, and we would go there and learn about severe autism, which was the individuals who were at the state institution. And there was a lot of overlap with schizophrenia. There was not clarity. There was also a diagnosis called childhood schizophrenia at that time.
Yeah.
Very, very big overlap with autism. But the main thing was that we were just coming off of an era of people still were like, oh, is this caused by cold parenting?
Yeah.
Because there were the theories of Bruno Bettelheim, who was the individual who had said, this has to do with the refrigerator mother. This has to do with a mother who is not able to interact with her child.
You know what I say to that?
What do you
That's
say?
the hot put.
Oh yeah, definitely the hot put. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that was Bettelheim, and it was still around in the 70s, you know, and so there was like this whole, I guess, movement in our group and in our department that was like, no, individuals with autism, first of all, are different than individuals that just have brain injury or what was in those days called mental retardation or intellectual disability. And that there could be an overlap with intellectual disability, but it does not necessarily mean that every individual who has a diagnosis with autism also has intellectual disability. And so the whole focus of our program, if I remember in the first years, was just letting the world know that individuals with autism are teachable. They can learn. Because that was not the belief, right?
Yeah.
There was no study showing that individuals with autism can either recover or live a normal life. Nothing like that had ever happened. So every study or anything that had to do with autism was more just, listen, remember, autism was first defined in the late 40s, right? So we're talking only 30 years after that is when I got involved with autism. So it was very much a matter of defining what this is. And just like, what are the characteristics of individuals with autism? And there were lots of problems. It was a very unstable period in the sense that, you know, the diagnostic manual was continuously changing. It was like the DSM-2 to the DSM-3 to the 4. Like, wait a minute, what is this?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until 4 that there were subdivisions, right? Where we were like, okay, well, there's autism or autistic disorder, and then there's Asperger's, and that was like in the 90s. And then there's, you know, PDD-NOS, or pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. There was like, and Rett, and disintegrative disorder. There were 5 subcategories that came out in the 90s. But before that, it was the DSM-3, and it had, like, if I remember correctly, gosh, a long time ago, because I was being trained on diagnosis back then, and it was like all these 16 or so symptoms had to be present. So we just didn't know enough, right?
Yeah.
And remember, there wasn't enough money in it either because it was such a low prevalence.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't money going into research. There wasn't money looking at genetic influence, metabolic influence. There wasn't any research being done on, you know, gastrointestinal. All of this stuff, the movement that came about was much later. So what we were doing, I guess, as, you know, Ivar was really a pioneer in this area, was we were just trying to say, hey, using the right techniques, these individuals learn.
Yes.
And then there were others who came along at the same time who were brilliant in their own way, like Bernie Rimland. And Bernie Rimland's whole thing was, this has nothing to do with parenting. I have a child with autism, and we've been the loving parents that anyone would want, and this has nothing. And so he was writing a book, or many books, on just that issue and saying this has nothing to do with parenting. It's a biochemical issue. And Bernie was amazing, right? And he was just pushing that whole premise forward and saying, we got to look more into the biochemistry of these individuals. And then Bernie was the one who brought together all the physicians who were working in that world, again in the 90s, like many years later. And it wasn't until many years later, as I said, in the 90s, it's just amazing that when I think about it, all the stuff that really came in, like the Andy group, if you remember Karen Cerruti and all of those folks who came in and said, hey, by the way, gluten has something to do with this, and casein has something to do with this. And literally, Shannon, all of that came almost, I want to say 15 to 20 years after I started in this field.
Yeah.
So it was a long, long, long time later. And the 70s and 80s was about understanding that individuals on the spectrum can learn, changing the modality of intervention, getting institutions closed, and which I don't know if it was the right thing to do, to be honest, but anyway, I think that a lot of individuals after institutions were closed just went with no care.
Right.
Which wasn't the intent.
You're not saying that the institutions were great. You're just saying that you need to
Institutions
put
were
something.
horrible.
You need to put something in place.
Right. The institutions were awful, and
Yeah.
they had to be closed down, but nothing was put in place. And it was really a lot about just kind of honing in and figuring out what can we do to help these individuals, right?
Yeah.
My life in the 80s was all about just this research study, because we were very, very involved in the research study, and we produced a film about behavioral intervention. And the research study had to do with, looking and saying, does this intervention that we're doing work? And what level of it works, and how do we and then Ivar, of course, wrote a study that was published in 87. So if you think about the period of time between 78 and 87 is when I'm working there. And so it was all a lot of research, a lot of working with kids individually, figuring out kind of the whole everything in ABA. Like we were developing the concept of discrete trial. We were developing the concept of random rotation. We were developing the concept of, we were like looking at IQ tests and figuring out how do we teach these skills? How many of these skills are teachable? Or how do we teach different things that will help the child change the way they think? So that's what it was. That's when I learned, was in the 70s. And so, Corey, my first child.
Well, I want to talk about Corey, because so often, over the years, I've interviewed so many people, and I usually say to them, it's so amazing that you chose to be in this field, and I want to know what was the moment that
I knew?
That your gut went, okay, I want to do this forever. And I'm just realizing I've interviewed all these people and asked them, and I have never asked you that. I've read a little bit about Corey, but talk about that.
Corey influenced me in the sense that I was so lucky to have him as one of my, so we had set up this program at UCLA, and it was a program where undergraduate students would enter and would get a series of courses, and then if you were an A student, you would go to the next level of courses, and there you could actually work with kids. Okay. And so Corey was my first child that I worked with, and my job was actually, to teach him math. Because he was, I'm trying to remember how old he was when I met him, like maybe 5, 7, I don't remember accurately. But the interesting thing about Corey was, we had a team, right, of therapists, and each of us had 6 hours on that child, and that was our job. Corey had a identical twin, who did not have the diagnosis.
Wow.
Now, what's interesting, and I remember his name, of course, but I don't want to give too much information.
Sure.
And he then started acting autistic for about a year, because obviously we were giving so much attention to Corey that his brother wanted the attention. But the thing about Corey that was insane was he was the first child that had a special skill, right? And I was very lucky that he was my first child, because his skill was he had a ridiculous visual, almost photographic memory.
Wow.
Now, he was very delayed in a lot of different ways, but had this incredible photographic memory. So I, being a student, I would take him places. I would and one time I took him to my house So I wanted him to meet my parents and stuff like that. I mean, I was young. I was like, remember, this is me second year at UCLA, so I'm 16.
Wow.
You know, so I'm very young. So I took him to my house, and then another time, I don't know, time passed, and then I took him to my house again, and the immediate first thing he said was, the color of this house has changed. Like, he recognized that the house had been painted.
Wow.
And then I realized, this is crazy. How does he remember that? I don't remember that. So I started asking him a bunch of questions, and I realized, oh my God, this kid has like an insane memory of visual things, right?
Yes.
So I discovered, knew how to go to places. He had memorized maps.
Wow.
So that was the moment for me where I remember I would go on walks with him in the neighborhood, because I was also trying to teach him how to purchase something at a store and get change. That was the whole concept of the math. And when I was walking with him, I remember asking him all sorts of questions and just thinking to myself, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, this is not, because honestly, Shannon, we all were taught that this is similar to like intellectual disability. This is similar to Downs. This is all within the same, and it's not, right?
No.
So I kept thinking, like, what is this? This guy must have he's got to have a very high IQ. Like, how does he know all these things? And how does he remember all these things? That was one thing that really intrigued me.
Okay.
Then you got to fast forward. Now I'm in this program and I'm seeing all these kids, but I'm an undergrad. And then I become a grad and I stay in this. And the thing that I think for me just sealed, this is my future, because once you're a grad student, you get to rotate into other areas, right? And so now I'm still working with Lovos, but I had lots of other mentors enter my world, because now I'm studying other things as well. Like eating disorders was a big thing in the 90s or 80s, actually, I should say. 80s is when I'm a grad student. And like, and AIDS had just, so those were my two other, like I had to go into AIDS and eating disorders. But the thing that solidified my autism as my life were the moms. Yeah. Because as a grad student, then I started to actually see moms and, or spend time doing kind of therapeutic work with the moms and just sitting after hours. I was running the clinic at UCLA, so I'd start very early and I'd go till like, I don't know, 8 o'clock at night. Like, and part of that was while the kids were getting therapy in one of our clinic rooms, I was with the mom. And that was, I think, life-changing for me. Wow. That was really it. And I remember this one mom in particular who actually was also Persian. And she would just come and pour her heart out. Aww. And I just, every day when I met with her and I left, she would stay with me for hours and hours. And I kept thinking, how do I help her? How do I help these moms? How do I help these moms? That's what pulled me in. It wasn't so much, I mean, I was very connected to the kids and that we were on a path with the kids, but it was more for me like, how do I help? How is she going through this? That's what it was for me. And that's when I knew I have to stay,
Well, I knew that you had worked with eating disorders. I didn't realize that there was an interest with AIDS too.
We had rotations. We had to do these rotations. I actually saw AIDS patients for 4 months.
It's amazing to me to think, like, if life had been different and you'd become an expert in AIDS and what you would have done for the AIDS community. And I feel guilty saying I'm glad you stuck with autism.
Isn't it crazy?
But it is crazy, and to all of our benefit, obviously.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. So here's a weird question, because you were in this place at UCLA and then you left UCLA.
Yeah.
Did you?
How did that come about?
Well, no. Well, I want to know that too. But did you get to keep contact, for instance, with that mom and with Corey?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So when I left UCLA, actually, Ivor had asked me if I had any interest in going to Berkeley and trying to do a similar clinic at Berkeley. And sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had done that, but I didn't. I stayed in LA. I opened a private clinic. I had a lot of patients. So the UCLA clinic at that time was a research clinic, and it was small. And they would exit kids as soon as kids reached, I think, age 5 or so, very young. So a lot of those kids actually who hadn't maxed out came with me,
Yeah.
including that family.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In fact, that family stayed with me for quite a long time, and then the mom, I trained, and she worked for me.
Wow.
And she was doing kind of like she was talking to other moms. So this was, and you have to remember, this is before funding.
Right.
There was no public funding. I was getting regional center funding. That was my first source of funding, yeah. So, so why and how that all came about is just that I essentially started this business at CARD, and I was still pre-licensed. So I was like, I'd started the business and I was also studying for my licensing exam.
Yeah.
It was 91. And yeah, and then so I started seeing kids, and as you know, the rest is history. I hired Nilu.
Yeah.
She helped me start building the business. I hired Evelyn, same
Yeah.
year. Those were all, I just was talking to Evelyn, and she was reminding me that she joined CARD in early 93. So, and that was the very beginning. And now she wasn't even, I mean, before that was like Kathy Thompson and some of our very senior folks who, the way I hired them actually was interesting because word of mouth, people started contacting me and saying, hey, we heard about you. You were at UCLA, you have private, we want to come to you. And when they would come, some of them had UCLA therapists with them. And I didn't even have the business yet. So Eva was reminding me that when she came on in 93, she was still also at UCLA. And I would actually, because I didn't have a business yet, I would actually give her a check from my checkbook. Saying, hey, you worked 10 hours for this patient this week, here's your pay. Same thing with Kathy Thompson. And when you look at their records at CARD, it's when I actually incorporated the business, was 94, and that's why they are now on 94. But they actually both started in 93. And Nilu too, Nilu in 92, I think.
Well, and I had heard that story before, but what's interesting now, because I've met so many parents across the years, and the way that everybody would describe it at that time, the parents, is that their child would be diagnosed with autism, and if they were a parent that had some hope for some reason, because at the time nobody was giving anybody hope.
Yes.
But if they had some hope and they were persistent and they asked questions, what they were told is, oh, there's a woman you need to see in the valley. That's how everybody referred to you.
I love
there's
that.
a woman you need to see in the valley.
I love that.
She's making incredible things happen.
That's amazing.
And that's how word of mouth got out about you. They were
Yeah.
like, have you seen the woman in the valley?
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
great.
do you know the Muffin Man? You know, the equivalent of, have you seen the woman in the valley? And that so many parents
started coming,
and there was like this underground sort of communication about, because I know on the day that my son was diagnosed, the woman who was diagnosing him, it was her first day of retirement. She had worked in the field for 50 years, and it was her first day of retirement. She had come in retirement to, it was through Kaiser, and she said to me, you're very lucky that you're catching me in the first day of retirement, because if this were my first day of practicing, Jem was 2.5. She said, I would tell, my first day, I would have told you, just have him committed to one of the institutions and walk away and forget you ever had this child.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And I was like so offended. And I said, this baby? And she said, yeah, that would have been the first day. Now we're 50 years later, and I won't tell you to do that, but she's the one who said, go home and enjoy him. And when I asked her about ADA, she said, no, don't do that. Fortunately, I didn't end up listening to her. Thank God. But, I always think about that there was a time and a place when people, I mean, when you think about, there's a very small part of, there's a movie that Bette Midler did with Nathan Lane, where she played, the author of, now I'm going to have a senior moment. Jacqueline Suzanne, she wrote the book Fear of Flying,
I don't know this,
She had a son that was on the spectrum.
Oh, okay.
And they cover it very briefly in the movie. This was their pride and joy. They'd waited forever to have this son. He was diagnosed autism. They told her, put him in an institution, and it wasn't Fear of Flying, it was Valley of the Dolls.
Oh.
Valley of the Dolls. She wrote Valley of the Dolls because she needed to raise the money to pay for him in the institution.
No way.
Yes,
That's
and I didn't
crazy.
know that
I
until
didn't know that.
Valley of the
Wow.
Dolls. That's the book. So,
wow.
yes, because that was the only hope that they gave her. The only hope for him is put him in the institution,
Yeah.
and she was paying for a good one because there were horrible ones. But that was why she sat down and put pen to paper. She was like, I got to make some money to support my kid. But she would go and visit him from time to time, but they would tell her, no,
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
you should leave us
Yeah.
with him and forget him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Horrifying.
It was very different, Shannon. If I could, like what I saw at Camarillo State Hospital was a different disorder. It was something else. Like you had such severe individuals
Yeah.
where they had no form of communication. Their only form of communication was self-injury. Because they were experiencing, I don't know what. Nobody knew what. Were they experiencing pain? Was it overstimulation? Nobody knew. But I mean, there were kids at Camarillo where, I hate to say this because I don't want to freak out our viewers, but I mean, I had a little boy who had hit his head into the wall so many times that honestly, he had like a protrusion here. That was just insane. We had to we couldn't even fit a helmet on him to protect him.
Oh.
There was a little girl, 5 years old, who had bitten off her own fingers. I mean, you know?
Yeah.
So it's,
Because left with no supports, I mean, it's scary to think about that.
It was almost as if they were trapped and trying to communicate
Yes.
something and
Yes.
had no support, they were just frustrated, angry, in pain, disturbed.
Yes.
And this is how they
Yes.
were expressing. And when you see something like that, you cannot walk away from it. You cannot, right? All you
I
just
love
want
that
to
you
do is...
didn't. I love that you didn't.
Well, you can't. I mean, I don't know how any human being can, right? Because you would just sit there and you'd just want to hold these kids and
Yeah.
say, we'll figure it out together.
And that has led you to a lifelong passion
Right,
where you've
right.
helped so many people.
Yeah.
Can I just tell you very briefly the first time I
I
heard the
wanna
word
hear,
autism?
yes.
Although, because
wanna hear.
I put this story in my one-woman comedy show. This is not the comedy part of
Oh.
it. But when I was little, we moved to upstate New York, and there, it was a period of time when the dads all went to work and the moms all stayed home with the kids.
course.
That's what it was. And nobody had air conditioning, and we could hear everything that was going on in everybody's house, because the windows were open and the houses were close to each other. And there was this period of time every day when all the moms would stand in the street, in the middle of the street, after the babies woke up from the naps, and they would
Yes.
chat.
This is
Nobody
crazy.
went to
I'm
anybody's
trying
house.
to like imagine this scene, and I love it. It's like a movie. And this is in New York.
Upstate New York,
Yeah.
Saratoga, New York, and so
Yeah.
as a little girl, I watched these women and I was like,
Yeah.
these are, I'm not living
Yeah.
this life.
Yeah.
I was like 100% sure I was not
Yeah.
living that life. But there was one mom, because there's always one mom who's just a little different.
Yeah.
Like the other moms were wearing the polyester shorts.
Yeah.
This mom
Yeah.
looked like Jackie Kennedy.
Oh.
And I just always was like, I want to grow up to be like her.
Oh, wow.
She looked like Jackie Kennedy or Marlo Thomas from That Girl. She had beautiful black hair that flipped up. And she had these two beautiful little boys. They weren't twins. They were 9 months apart. And they were the most precious, white-haired little boys with just these apple cheeks. And I loved those little boys. I just thought they were the most amazing thing. And I thought she was the mom I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Right? So that was the whole idea. And I literally would stand in my bedroom at night and pray, I want to grow up to be like her,
Wow.
not like these other women.
Wow.
Okay, so fast forward to when I'm 16 years old and everybody has air conditioning and I haven't kept up with what everybody's doing because I'm 16 and
Right,
I'm
right.
busy listening to new wave music. And right?
Are you still in the same spot?
Still in the same house,
Okay.
and everybody's still living in the same houses. But there's one day when this kid appears on my mother's porch, rocking, just like a madman, rocking, just violently. And my brother walked by the front door, saw him, and yelled up to my mother and said, that weirdo, the last name, I don't want to say it, is on the porch again.
Wow.
So at that point, he was like 10. And my mom yelled from a back bedroom and said, go down and go grab, there's a roll of butterscotch lifesavers on my desk. go down and keep him there until his mother comes. I'm calling her. I had no idea what was happening whatsoever. And I ran down to the front porch, and I had this, there was a roll of butter rum Lifesavers, which I was like, what? I didn't really, it was, like on this protective space on the desk.
This is also early, like mid-70s,
So this
late
would be
70s.
78, right?
Yeah.
And I ran down to the porch,
Yeah.
and what I remember very distinctly is that there was this moment of realization when I realized he's one of those apple-cheeked boys. I knew who he was, although he looked so different. He was very thin and pale because basically they were keeping, he was a flight risk. He would elope. And so they kept him locked up inside, right? But I always say that there was this moment that I did not understand at 16, but that I realize now, like there was something that my DNA recognized.
Yeah.
Something. There was this moment where, and I didn't know what it was at 16, but, and I tried to connect with him. He didn't want to connect. He just took the Lifesavers, put the whole roll in his mouth, went back on the swing, but I could hear his mom coming around the corner, because their house was behind ours. I could hear her coming around the corner, and when she came around the corner, I knew it was her, but it was such an impact. She looked so different. She was pale. She was thin. She looked like Cruella de Vil because there was a swath of white hair, and she just looked bad. And she came running up the steps of the porch, and my mom came out the door at the same time. And so this child leapt up from the swing and just ran past all of us and ran down into the street and started to run away. And the thing that was so just etched in my memory was the mom turned to run after him, and my mother, who's always the soul of helpful, she said, "Do you need help?" And the mom said, "No," in a very sad way. She said, I got this. This is my thing. And she ran after her, and I stood there on the porch with my mom for the longest time. Like I didn't know what had happened, but then my mom said this bombshell thing. She said, "Isn't it terrible what autism has done to that poor woman?"
Oh.
And I was like, for years I had prayed to be her.
Yeah.
And then here was this thing, and in that moment I said, please don't let me grow up to have her life.
Yeah. Wow.
Please don't let me grow up to have her life. And of course the universe had entirely different ideas.
And how terrifying it must have been when you got the diagnosis.
Well, and in between that, one of the girls who was one of my roommates at college, she got pregnant right after college, and she had her first child, who was happy, wonderful, and everything, and then she had her second child, and he was pretty severe on the spectrum. And I just remember, I was like, oh no, what is this going to do to her? That was my first thought. I didn't think about her child. I thought, what is this going to do to her? Because there was that shadow thing of
that
this
moment, that
eats
mom.
moms.
Yeah.
This, whatever
Yeah.
this thing
Yeah.
is, it eats moms. And I watched it have a pretty big impact on her life.
Me too. Yeah.
I watched, I got to go see her in rehab for crack.
Oh.
So that reinforced that
Oh
as
my
well.
God.
Right? So when Jem was diagnosed, I was like, this cannot
It's the end of my
be.
life. Yeah.
And I did think that, and that doctor who diagnosed made me believe she would, when she said, you need to go home and enjoy him, and my arms were covered in bite marks. And I thought, oh, this is it. This is the beginning of the end of everything.
I cannot even imagine. Oh my God, the
But-
fear.
Yes, and so that resonates with me when there are moms who will say, my life is over, because I need to step up now and either give everything over to this and become the super mom. And I know some people like to depict me as the super mom, and I assure you guys, that I am not, and I wasn't. And I was a hot freaking mess most of the time. That I became agoraphobic. I had a nervous breakdown. Not super mom. There is no cape. I found my way through it with the help of you and other people who helped me through it. And I lived to tell the tale. You know what they say about you don't get a testimony without a test. And I feel like I went through the test, but I got incredibly lucky. I got incredibly lucky that I found you guys, and then we worked hard.
Yes.
And it's those two things. I always say I'm going to get the pillow crocheted that says, the harder we worked, the luckier we got.
Yes.
So there is that part of it. And I own the fact that we stayed and we worked through But you know, to have that sort of a, just, you know, my mother saying, look at, you know.
I mean, it's crazy, Shannon, and you just made me realize that you and I pretty much heard the term the same year.
Time. Yeah.
The same year.
Yes.
And we both were kind of empowered by a mom.
Yes.
Right? Like
Yes.
the whole thing became very solid because of a mom, like the experience of a mom. And then our universes kind of came back together this way.
Yes.
Which is also very interesting. But yeah, I mean, like it is, and we've made so much progress when you look back.
Yes.
But we still have so much to do. And
as the UN says.
As the UN says, and I have to tell you, like, I worry now. I come back, it's funny because, you know, you never leave the world of autism, but I tried to retire for a few years. And
the
you know,
universe
you
said
and
no.
I worked together
Yes.
through those few years, and we never stopped this show, which is awesome and part of just my life. But when I come back and I'm, like, now fully involved, I just see that in some ways we're going down a little bit of a wrong path.
I agree with you.
And I'm a little bit scared for this field, because for autism, to be honest, because I just think that, and maybe, I don't know, you know, like, and we've learned a lot. I always say the people who made the biggest impact in this field were parents of individuals on the spectrum or individuals on the spectrum themselves, one or the other, right?
Yeah.
I mean, by far, like, and if you had gone through the journey of autism when I did, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, now, you know, 10s and now 20s, you would have seen the impact parents had. Like, just start with something as basic as now we all live with a gluten-free, casein-free. That was all just one mom.
Right.
It was all just one mom who started this.
Yeah.
Or if you look at just the whole concept of actually biomedical interventions, you know, that's just one parent who started all that, one dad, you know, Bernie. And when you look at all of these different things, or the genetic research, a lot of the folks that are doing some of the most important research are parents.
Yeah.
Or the whole concept of insurance. I'm just getting texts from Gretchen today about some other sad thing that just happened, but Gretchen Jacobs, you know, great example of a powerful person who brought about this coverage. Or when you talk about the UN, or like, let's look at, you know, the power of some of these organizations who have brought huge awareness. Autism Speaks. I know a lot of people are kind of against Autism Speaks in some ways, but let's face it, awareness came about with Autism Speaks. I mean, I lived that, and that was a family. That was a parent and a grandparent and a parent.
Absolutely.
And so, like, a lot of the parents have just made a huge, huge, huge impact. And some of the parents now say to us, maybe this disorder should be divided into severe and not severe. And maybe that's where we should be going, because what's helpful to individuals who are very severe is different in some ways than what's helpful to those who are mildly affected by autism. And it is a huge spectrum, and maybe that's the right thing. I don't know. I just feel like my heart is still very compassionate for those who have severe children, who are experiencing a whole different thing where their lives are just sucked in by this. And it's not fun, you know, and it's not fun. It's hard.
It's
a
hard life. Well, that kind of goes along with one of the questions that somebody asked is, if you could teach the world one thing about autism, what would it be? What would it be? Oh my gosh.
Right now I'm in a space that might be different. Here's the space I'm in right now.
Okay.
The label of autism basically has just very limited use to me. One function of having the label is that you can get funding.
Yeah.
That's a very important function.
Yeah.
Another, I guess, use for this label, or another function for the label, is that it guides you towards certain interventions, right? Like, oh, you should be doing some ABA, you should be doing some speech, you should be doing maybe medical interventions, or whatever it is for that, right?
Yeah.
But other than that, if you put the label aside for a moment, and labels are what cause problems in general. Labels are when we start to overclassify people and judge them. And if the label was gone and you had an individual who struggled with certain things, okay, those things that we now put together and call autism. Okay. If you just looked at those things and the individual either was capable of saying this themselves, or the person who loved them the most, being the parent, could say this for them, was, I need help to be able to, it starts with survive and then get to thrive, right? I need help first in order to be able to survive, which means I need help to learn how to communicate. I need help to know how to be safe. I need help to socialize so I'm not alone and depressed. I need help to be able to do get myself dressed and just eat. Have as much of a normal life as possible, or as much of a, just survive in this world. I need help. All the way to those individuals who would say, I need help so I can actually get a job. I need help so I can go to college. I need help so I know how to behave around people of the other sex. I need help
deal with a
thrive.
breakup.
It's from, what do we all do? We survive on some days and we thrive on other days, right? It's a back and forth. And if all the labels were gone and all the politics around it was gone and all of that, I'd want to be there to help that individual who needs help. And that's it. If the person says, I need help, I want to be able to help you. If they can't speak for themselves and they're the person who loves them the most, their parent, says, my child needs help, I want to be there to help them. That's it. That's really all it is. And the help needs to be compassionate. It needs to be effective. It needs to be at the pace that the individual can handle. It needs to be fair. And that's all. That's that's the message I would give to the world. I just want people to stop. We say that we've stopped labeling. We haven't.
No.
Everybody labels. As soon as you say someone has autism, everybody's like, oh, he's this, he's that. In fact, it's gotten to the point where people who don't have autism, others are like, I think he has a bit of autism. It's become that as well. So it's kind of like, the label is the problem.
I so appreciate that. I have a couple of questions to ask because we're running out of time. People want to know, what are you most excited about being back at CARD?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. It's such a weird experience for me because I am working harder than I've ever worked. It's like back in the 90s. It's like opening a new company. I mean, honestly, I'm emailing and stuff until 10, 11 o'clock at night every day. But I am happy and excited because I'm problem solving and the solution. When you find solutions to problems, the result finding the solution is the kind of the token. What you trade that token in for, what it means when you when you solve problems, is you have a bunch of happy patients, happy families, and happy employees. And that is my kick, right? It's like whoa, I love this. All the employees are happy about this, and all the families, the kids are getting better treatment. When I see that we've increased our hours of service by 20% in 6 months.
That's amazing.
It is insane, right?
It's
20% in 6 months. I'm not thinking, oh yes, we're getting 20% more dollars, because that's all being paid out anyway. What I'm thinking is, that's 20% more kids that got in the door. This morning, I had a call with one region where Payer, an insurance company, has just referred 15 kids to us. And everyone was saying, no, we can't do it. We're just overwhelmed. And I was like, are you kidding? What are we here for then? Of course we can do it. We just need to immediately hire more staff, immediately train them, get them on there, pull from other locations, get it going. What are we here for?
Exactly.
So that's what excites me, is being able to just step into the next family and say, hey, I'm here. You know, you said like how it changed your life when you had a bunch of people just enter your world and help.
Yeah.
That's what I want to keep doing.
Pivotal.
That's the best part of it.
Well, and can I tell you, it's so inspirational to be around you while you're making that happen.
Oh, thank
for all
you.
of us. So
when I
always-
hobble in with my
well,
knee and my
we want you
back.
to take care of yourself. Self-care starts with you. But somebody wrote in and wanted to know, and I thought, oh, this is a great one because you use this word all the time. What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh yeah, that's you know, I haven't. It's so funny. I guess the last 5 years taught me what I don't want my legacy to be.
Okay, that's
you know what I
fair.
mean? Like
Yeah.
I never thought about my legacy in that sense because
Yeah.
I thought like I've made this amazing thing which goes on. It's this engine which will go on forever and help more and more. And that was why I sold card.
Yeah.
Was like I'm at capacity. I can't handle more than
Well, you had
260
achieved
sites.
it. We all looked at it and said that. You
right.
had a healthy company. You had achieved that.
Fantastic. And I was like, these people are going to come in and help and make it much, much bigger.
Yeah.
And so that means many, many more people can access, and it'll be a
Yes.
national thing, and everybody will have access. Fortunately, other companies have come in as well, and there is more help. But my legacy has to have something to do with she helped people. She helped people in this world, right, of autism, because that's that's what my
Well,
life
you have
is dedicated
achieved
to.
that.
Well, thank you, but I think I never want to step away from it thinking, oh my God, like everything we built is gone,
Yes.
you know? And that's where it was,
Absolutely.
and that's why I got back involved, because it was about to be gone.
Yes. And
So.
a very, very scary time. So I don't know if you know, Gene Siskel of Siskel and Ebert,
Sure.
he used to ask the one question. And then he's not with us anymore. And so Oprah loved this question so much, she took it, and I'm stealing it now
Oh,
from Gene
good.
and Oprah. But the question is, what is the one thing you know for sure?
Oh.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes to mind is the one thing I know for sure is we still don't know a lot about autism. That's the one thing I know for sure. So what that means to me is we all are learning. We still need to keep an open mind. So I don't like it when people come in and say it's either this or that.
Yeah.
Like that's why I'm dedicating so much of my time to trying to teach behavior analysts about the medical side.
Yes.
Because that was something that, remember, like this is the one thing I know for sure, is that it has nothing to do with bad parenting. That was
Yes.
something that everybody believed.
Yes.
So on an ongoing basis, the one thing I know for sure is we still have a lot of learning to do in this field. And everyone needs to be open-minded. When I hear about certain things that are like just on the, you know, like fecal transplant is a good
Right.
example.
Right.
I think, you know what, theoretically this could work. So I'm always open to, I want people to do the research. I want them to keep going because there's so much more we don't know. And that's what I know for sure.
Okay, I love
Yeah.
that. One last question. I didn't think we were going to have time for it. And then I got to tell everybody what's happening the rest of this week. But if there was one call to action that you could say to the people watching, what would you ask them to do? Because we said it's autism, you know, World Autism Day, but it's autism appreciation, autism awareness, action. So if there was one thing,
Yeah.
knowing that a lot of our audience is parents, but not all,
Yeah.
what action would you
You know,
have them
I
do?
guess I don't know that this is an action.
Okay.
But I really want people to be a little bit more accepting of all the folks out there who are trying to make things better for individuals on the spectrum. There's so much criticism of like ABA or even like medical or this, like people are just, we're as a population, as a generation, we're just much more much faster to criticize
Yeah.
than appreciate.
Yeah, well,
And
contempt without investigation is a
Yeah.
very big thing in this era.
It just is. And I feel like everyone should realize that, you know, anyone who gets into this field, and I know there are the oddballs out there who are not really in this field for the right reasons,
Yeah.
but the vast majority of people who get into healthcare in general are there because they want to help.
Yes.
They want to do the right thing. And so I just feel like there needs to be a little bit more understanding. Like a lot of self-advocates say, we want you to be compassionate towards us. And I guess I would say the same, is I want everyone, be more compassionate to parents, be more compassionate to providers. Like, let's just really build a place of understanding so that we can all come together and do what's the best.
Yeah.
And because there is so much learning left, it's really all about just listening to each other. Everyone listening to each other, not just listening because the person is diagnosed, not just listening because the person is 50 years in this field, not just listening for various, but everyone listening, because everybody's opinion is valid.
Yeah. Well, I love that.
Thank
and
you.
I loved having this hour to spend
It
with
was
you
so
on this
nice
amazing
to chat with
day.
you all these things.
Yes.
One of these days I'm going to ask you all these questions.
You can interview me whenever you want to. I'm up for that. You can be
sounds
shaving my
great.
head
We should
while
do
you
that.
do that. Yes.
Thank you.
In any case, always such a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you.
In any capacity. I want to go over the next couple of days because we got a big week this week. We had Dr. Stephen Shore on yesterday. Tomorrow, Tom Island is back with us. He has written a new book that is My Glass is Full. And it's all about mental health for individuals on the spectrum. And really taking a look at, he came into sharp focus about this during the pandemic and about how important it is for self-care and mental self-care. So we're going to talk with him about that. And of course, he was here last year during the podcast-a-thon with his fiance. We'll get an update from him about when is the happy date.
Wonderful.
So we're looking forward to that. Then on Wednesday, oh, no, that was Wednesday. Sorry. On Thursday, Kobe Bird is here with us. And oh my gosh, he is just a delight. You guys loved him on Lock and Key and on The Good Doctor. He is here with us. And we're doing a whole hour learning about him and what Kobe likes to do with his time. He is a fascinating, intelligent young man. You'll love that. And of course, on Friday is when we are having Julie Matthews. And oh my gosh, some of the research that she has done recently is just is so eye-opening, you guys, about which diets help to alleviate which symptoms.
That's this Friday.
This Friday, coming Friday.
Wonderful.
It's absolutely amazing. You guys are going to love that. So, and then wait until you see, we'll disclose a little bit later on the week some of the guests that we have coming up. But the month is all scheduled. You guys should be able to take a look at our calendar today. You can be looking at that on our Facebook page that shows you who is on what day so that you won't miss anything. And of course, as soon as the shows premiere, they will be available as podcasts. You're not going to want to miss that. Some amazing experts, amazing folks on the spectrum. We'll get into a little controversy this month because what would we be doing if we weren't? So we'll look forward to that as well. But thank you all for taking your time during World Autism Day to be with us. Thank you for taking the time to share your brilliant mind. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We hope to see you there.